All right. Thanks once again, everyone, for joining us for the Faces of Business. I'm your host, Damon Pastolka, and with me today, I've got Beau Billington from the Free Agent. So, Beau, thanks for being here today.
I appreciate you having me on, Damon. Good to
Ye-
be here.
Yes. So, first of all, Beau, you're in the Southeast. You're in the Atlanta area.
Yeah.
So, I do have to say or ask you, what is the weather like there now?
So if you would have asked me 2 days ago, it would have been 75, 80, sunny, blue skies.
Yeah.
Today, literally cold front kind of rolled in about 55, 50 degrees, and it's rainy for the next 3 days.
Oh.
Yeah, but there's a rebound in sight. Come the weekend, I think we're gonna be back to nice spring weather, which is one of the times that I love best about Atlanta.
Yeah, yeah, it is nice in the spring there, yeah, March is the month when it starts to get nice, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, there's some showers throughout March and April, but I mean, they're as fast as they appear, they're gone, and then the
Yeah,
weather's pristine.
good,
Yeah.
good. So you've got an interesting background there, Beau, and you're doing some cool stuff now with the recruiting that you're doing and the free agent stuff. So why don't we start a little bit in your background and what really where just start early in your career and kind of how you evolved into recruiting.
Sure. Good question. I never really aspired to be a recruiter or a headhunter, and of course, no offense meant to those that are in this industry. Kind of happened organically, to be honest with you. And kind of rewind a little bit. Majority of my career, I spent selling software and services into like the Fortune 50. Worked for international companies, did a lot of international travel. Frankly, got totally burned out. Had my first kid, built a house. Was in Toronto like 2 days before Christmas. And it looked like I was about to get snowed in. And this is the first Christmas with my oldest daughter. And honestly, I was sitting at the bar watching TV, and ESPN came on, and they were talking about so and so is going to be a free agent. And I was sitting alone, and literally just started kind of thinking to myself, like, how cool would that be if I was by myself, if I could do my own thing, plug into different companies, and ultimately be in charge of my destiny. And that's really kind of was the genesis for the free agent. Of course, it took about 2.5 more years for me to get the courage, get the business plan where it needed to be and leave corporate America. But that's kind of how it spawned, literally just in I think it was a Courtyard Marriott in Toronto.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool. I'm writing it down because it's interesting. So you were watching TV and you got that someone was becoming a free agent, and that's gave you the idea for your company name.
Precisely, yes.
Yeah.
But also too, it's kind of the concept. Granted, when you're talking about the NBA, what they're not allowed to play for multiple teams.
Yeah.
That's kind
Yeah.
of it was like a free agent, this independent entity, excuse me, that I have the ability to kind of plug in and plug out and really do what I want to do from a career standpoint.
Yeah, yeah, that's nice. That's nice. So, when did you start? Okay, so this is your selling software and such, and then you decided that you wanted to be recruiting. I mean, that's quite a change.
It is. So what's crazy too is I believe tomorrow I have my 4-year anniversary for my company.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a timely conversation. That's a big milestone, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is.
But in regards to how I started, so prior to kind of jumping out, I worked for a professional services company where we were selling consulting services in the
Hmm.
Fortune 50. So think big IT installments, application development, and the like.
Okay.
And it was really kind of during that time that I noticed maybe there's some gaps within the consulting world, the way that things are done, and perhaps things could be done a little bit more efficiently. And so I already had kind of the concept of the free agent in the back of my mind that I've been kind of going through for the last 2 years and not sure what the actual literal application was. And then kind of having that experience for, over a year and a half, year and 7 months or so, selling consulting services, it kind of clicked. And I came to the realization, conclusion that I could put a business together that checks a lot of those boxes. A, makes me an
Hmm.
independent free agent, but B, also solves some needs and some challenges for organizations that are out there.
So, what were the needs or the challenges that you saw that you were like the industry really solve that well or address that well?
Sure. So a couple fold. So predominantly my experience was in the enterprise. And so where we focus now is really kind of that 10 million, 5 to 10 million, up to 200 million. So much of the
Hmm.
smaller market is where the focus is. And, really the kind of the problem that we solve for is when you look at the big companies, I feel they have, much more in tune processes, procedures. They're able to attract talent, easier, quicker, and they can also pay more. When you come mid
Hmm.
market, things change a little bit. And so what I really sought out to do is provide the same access to small organizations, the same access to, I'd say, executive talent that larger organizations have.
Okay. So you're trying to improve the access to talent, or trying to give them give a smaller company the same access to talent that a larger company would enjoy.
Precisely. Yes, exactly.
Okay. So what are, when you've been working in this industry the last 4 years, what are some of the changes that you've seen that have really changed the way that people have to go about their recruiting?
So I'd say the biggest change has been the prevalence of software platforms such as Indeed, LinkedIn, excuse me, and the like. And honestly, with that coupled with COVID, I feel the industry has really completely changed, and it's kind of somewhat of a mess right now, Damon. To be honest with you, because what you have is you have these low cost options that companies can leverage on Indeed. And a lot of times, those companies, the LinkedIn and the Indeeds, they're more concerned with the scale and simply the quantity versus the quality. And so there's a real mismatch. And the toughest part, though, is that you have these small companies with tighter purse strings.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times, they believe that the only way to kind of get access to talent is by leveraging these software platforms. But the
Hmm.
problem because of COVID is that they're just completely saturated with candidates. And so any company that puts a job rec out there, may have, 5X is probably an extreme example of what they would have had pre-COVID. And so that's a tremendous amount of candidates to sift through. The good candidates a lot of times will just naturally fall out of the process because companies can't move that quick with the amount of, candidates that are coming through the pipe. And so there's a lot of issues currently right now, kind of in the industry. But to answer your question, yes, companies can leverage software like LinkedIn and Indeed, but it's kind of a double-sided, you know, situation.
Yeah, yeah. So the COVID and the unemployment that was driven by it, you've really seen that affecting the amount of people that are available on the market, or is it?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
so the amount of folks available has substantially increased. Also, too, the amount of folks that are looking because maybe they feel that they're not in a stable situation.
Yeah.
But then on the other side of the fence, you have companies that are kind of, I don't want to say taking advantage of that situation, but they're really kind of cherry picking and looking for the exact perfect candidate. A lot of times they don't exist. And
Yeah.
so have kind of an open job order that should take, a month, 2 months, 3 months to fill, which is taking a lot longer because again, they're looking for that perfect person. Meanwhile, they're passing up candidates that are likely, would be great additions to their team.
This is a topic that it's kind of a side topic, but I mean, when you talk about these larger companies, do you think these ATSs are really helping them or hurting them? When I'm going to put a position out, I'm going to get thousands of applications. Um, are they doing the job they should?
No,
Or
I think they're terrible. I think ATS and BMSs are absolutely terrible for large organizations. And so a lot of times what they do is they try to kind of consolidate their vendor pool. So they'll leverage these ATSs or VMSs and consolidate the vendor pool, down to 3, 4, just as an example. And then they'll start, working on the rate card. And so they'll kind of lock these companies into small margins. And a lot of times that's going to lead to them looking for the crappier candidate, just being candid.
Mhm.
So no, I'm not a big believer in them. And maybe there's some scenarios where they can work out the kinks and they serve their need, and they have a purpose. There is a purpose there, but a
Mhm.
lot of times I feel like they actually cause more harm than maybe just a tighter procurement side of
Yeah. Yeah.
it.
Well, I think it's you look at some of these, and I can empathize with some of these hiring departments and such when they're, they could be processing tens of thousands of resumes a day for thousands of positions or whatever that is. And there's a need for them. But I also think that when you look at hiring at that scale, that the ATS is, like you said, a lot of the good candidates, they're best candidates in some cases, or maybe many, I don't know,
Right.
but and get tossed out because they just didn't do something right, because it's not intuitive like somebody looking at it would be.
Yeah, and the quality starts to suffer as well because it's less about the candidate and putting the right person at the company and more about the margin.
Mhm.
What are we going to take home? And
Yeah.
I think that the VMS, while they're out there to serve a purpose, a lot of times the inverse is actually what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. So when you decided you were going to be a recruiter and you were going to do this, you wanted to help make this a different experience. So can you tell me what you saw and what caused you to develop the experience that you wanted to create?
Sure. So when again, I've been doing this almost 4 years tomorrow, which is crazy. A lot of the feedback that I get from individuals, especially when I first started my company, was around the candidate experience. A lot of prospective candidates were always complaining about, getting ghosted by a recruiter, getting calls from recruiters where they didn't even take the time to kind of look at their background, look at their profile, and see if they're actually a fit. Recruiters that don't even understand, the company that they're representing or what the application or solution is that the company, deploys into the market. And so there really were just kind of a bunch of issues. And frankly, every time I talked to somebody and I showed up on time, I actually did my due diligence. It was good discussions. And, I felt as if really the candidate experience was lacking, and a lot of the due diligence that the recruiters and the headhunters should be doing is not happening.
Okay. So it's interesting. So when you talk about a recruiter's ghosting somebody, you're talking about somebody that they're in the process, they're talking with them about a position, and they just ghost them then, or
Yeah, so sometimes it doesn't always happen, and so it's
yeah,
I got to choose my words carefully here, right?
no, I'm just
You
curious.
know, with some of the I'd say less professional recruiters and headhunters out there, it's all about the shiny object, and
Hmm.
they're generally kind of laser focused. And so if they have a short list of 3 people, and the company for whatever reason is taking with one individual in particular, a lot of times those 2 other folks will not even get a phone call, just to say, hey, thanks for your time, but the company's moving in another direction.
Hmm.
And I think that's a big problem. And a lot of companies don't also understand is that if they're being represented by an agency, that can affect their brand.
Yes.
Because ultimately, I like to think that I'm an extension of the companies that I represent, and so I need to know what
Hmm.
they're doing, what the application is. I need to be able to speak intelligible about kind of what they're trying to accomplish, and it's just it baffles me.
Yeah, that is interesting because it. I mean, I can see if you got a lot of people, so you got hundreds of people that are applying to a single position, and you're not
Right.
got there. But once you start weeding it down into these few or a handful that are the final selection, and they come in for an interview, and then you ghost them after that, it's like that doesn't make sense, from a lot of different perspectives.
Right, but
Hmm.
also you bring up a good point. If you are hiring scale, or you're using LinkedIn, you have 500 applicants. It's extremely difficult to let 499 people know that they're not the right fit. That's
Yeah,
difficult.
yeah. Yeah, I can tell in the first, I can understand the first round. I would just think it would be awfully. It's a different situation when you've gone through the first round, you made it into the second round, you talk to somebody, and then they do an interview
Right.
at that second round, whatever that is, with the much smaller, or that it is the first in-person interview, and there's only a handful. I mean
Right.
that's manageable by anybody's standards to get a few emails out to somebody to let them know what's happening.
It should be, and I'm not perfect. Things
Yeah, yeah,
crack. But what's interesting to me is that this happens at the executive sector.
yeah,
This is not just the tactical workforce. This is
yeah, yeah. I mean, you were
corporate
talking executive recruiting.
organizations. And what's funny too is that when you're talking about recruiters and headhunters, they should have a vested interest to close the loop, because ultimately that's a potential buyer for them as well,
Mm-hmm,
right? Maybe it's not the right fit here, but
mm-hmm.
if you do a good job and are good at your craft, and that's somebody that you've kind of maybe teed up for a future relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, exactly. When you're doing executive recruiting, that same executive you place somewhere could be the one that recommends you, and that company buys from when you down the road, when you're down the road there. Yeah. That's good stuff. So when you looked at it, and we talked about this a little bit before we got on here on live, was the what were the things you were trying to change with your company, and how are you doing that?
Sure. So the biggest thing that I'm trying to change is, I think it all really ties back to the candidate experience, and doing a strong intake with the company that you represent. I think those are really critical, and that's hand holding the candidate through the entire process, the short list, not just the golden goose, if you will, but also to really getting to understand the organization that you represent. And so part of my process involves pretty lengthy intake with the leadership team. And
Hmm.
really, when you get to a certain level, I don't want to say that all skill sets are created equal, but when you get to a certain level, a lot of times the tactical skills are there, and it's really the soft skills that separate a good candidate, or a candidate that might be good for one company versus a candidate that's not good for another. And so,
Hmm.
that's really what we try to understand is, culturally, what are they looking for? What are the roles and responsibilities this individual will have, but also too, what is their team like? Because a lot of times these folks, they're not individual contributors. They're interfacing in an executive leadership role. So they've got maybe peers, but also direct reports. And so it's really critical that we get in and understand the ecosystem, which also too, though, helps us represent the brand properly in discussions. So I think it's kind of all tied together.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned soft skills, and
Mhm.
that's something that I think has to be fairly hard as a recruiter to be able, for the time that you get to spend typically
Right.
around a company, to really even understand those soft skills. What are some things that you do that might be a little bit different, that allow you to understand that better?
So first and foremost, we have, 2 to 3, sometimes 4 discussions with the candidate.
Okay.
First one's really, around quality of fit. And it's just kind of a very, very high level discussion. Talk about the role, talk about the background, but it's also conversation just like this. I'm not
Hmm.
drilling them. I don't have my checklist of items that I'm going through. It's really just kind of conversational, where I get to know the candidate. That's usually about 15 to 30 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes. And then assuming that we kind of check the majority of the boxes, we move to the next step, and that's where we get a little bit more in depth on the company, what they're trying to accomplish, but also to their background. And
Hmm.
that lasts anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour typically. And most often than not, we'll have kind of a follow-up discussion after that, just to kind of revalidate, recheck. So there's a multitude of different points. And I found, because, a lot of times too, if you talk to somebody once, you may have a different experience than the second time you talk to them.
Hmm.
And so having these different checkpoints, I've found, has helped us really kind of hone in on the personality, the skill sets, but also create a robust executive bio or executive summary, if you will, that we ultimately submit to the companies that we represent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So when you're so in executive placement overall, do you have any idea? Because I don't. What is the success rate? I mean, how many people actually get placed, and how many people are still there after 6 months, say?
That's a good question. I think that varies from industry, or not industry, but discipline to discipline. So first and foremost, our focus is predominantly sales, marketing, technology.
Hmm.
And as it pertains to us ultimately submitting candidates to our customers, we have a pretty high hit rate. We usually try to submit no more than 3, with a goal of 1 to 2. And typically we get a placement, from one of those, first two individuals that we ultimately submitted. As it
Okay.
pertains to the stay rate, that's really tough. So in sales, you're going to have the shorter
Yep.
of the two, right? I'd say typical VP of sales or chief revenue officer, we're looking at a year and a half, 3 years. I mean, if you make it 5 years, buddy, you're doing great. Marketing side, I'd say 3 to 5 years, and the technology could be anywhere, honestly. You get CIOs that will kind of step into these roles and be with organizations for the long haul, and then other roles that may have kind of a shorter tenure.
Yeah. So when you're hiring a sales manager or a CRO for a company, what's the average tenure of somebody like that in companies now?
So again, it really depends. I typically work within technology, so it's either SaaS
Yeah.
or services, and I'd say it could be 1.5, 3 years, and that's not necessarily from me, but that's kind of what I see in the marketplace.
Okay. Because I knew that had been going down a lot in those senior management roles in sales, especially as the economy goes
Right.
up and down. You run through a year of down or not great in an industry, and there's going to be a lot of churn.
Well, you have a few things. You have the economy, which is a big factor. You also have, the sales individual could be the greatest scapegoat of all times.
Yeah.
And then two, depending on the market, if you're in a saturated market or a hot market, there's going to be companies that are gunning for you. And so you could have sales that are on an uptick, then all of a sudden, like Martech, for instance, Martech, just to be very clear, super saturated market. And that could be one where maybe longevity as a chief revenue officer or senior salesperson could be short, just by the sheer fact that there's so much competition in the space, and acquiring sales is a difficult task.
Well, and this is something that I often ask and I thought about, but have never asked, and I think it's a good opportunity to do this. Is how many times do you think that people are churning salespeople when really they've got bigger systemic problems that are really the core of the issue rather than the people themselves?
A lot. I really do. I've had conversations with companies where, they said, "Hey, Beau, I've got a sales problem." Okay, well, what's the problem? Let's get to kind of let's digest it a little bit. And after deeper involvement and dialogue, it turns out that it's not necessarily a sales issue. Maybe it's not even marketing, but it's they don't even know succinctly what the value proposition of the company is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the things that we do in addition just to executive headhunting and recruiting, we also provide consulting services.
Mm-hmm.
We could bring kind of a fractional leader in that capacity to help the company kind of professionalize the sales process, which then may put them in a better position to hire a sales leader. But
Okay.
a lot of times people think that, sales cures all. That's an old adage, actually. And people do think that anybody can do sales. And if there's an issue, if revenue is not happening, it can't be product, it can't be marketing, it can't be technology, it's got to be sales.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I always thought about that, because I've had friends that work for larger companies or even people I know that worked in the medical industry before, medical devices and such, and the technology changes, and I think that caused more, and new technologies came out, or software, just all these solutions, and the people are often the sales goats, or the scapegoats in the whole thing, that actually the technology itself is it's matured to the point that you don't have a lot of places to sell, or it's being outpaced by a new technology.
Sure.
And the salespeople are the scapegoats. They want to go in and change the sales when it's really more of a systemic or a product problem at the back end of the business.
As simplistic as market fit. There's so many small organizations out there that are trying to sell into the enterprise that maybe don't even have a logo within the enterprise, and that's a tough proposition. I mean, maybe the best salesperson in the world could bridge that gap, but anybody's gonna have a challenge there, because there's no match.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's something I think too, that if you're having a deeper conversation with a company, I don't know if you can get into that part of it, but it really ultimately, changing people costs a tremendous amount of money, and whether you realize it or not. So if there's some other things that can be adjusted to make your people more successful, you're going to ultimately be performing better in the long run. Not that I know in your industry, changing people is the engine that drives the bus, but But if they were doing it the right way, you're going to need more people because they're going to have more sales anyway.
Well, that's the thing, though, is I don't want to replace anybody. To me, I add value to companies when they get the right person who sticks around. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's also why I have a problem with a lot of the job aggregators, if you will, like LinkedIn and Indeed, because I feel like a lot of the due diligence with the individuals they bring in isn't done because there's just too many candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So they end up turning and churning. Yeah, they're getting them for less expensive than maybe for hiring a company like mine. But at the end of the whole thing, it costs them more because they may go through 3 candidates,
Yeah.
versus just one. And it also costs, there's an opportunity cost for not having the right person, at the right time, early, if you kind of, delay the process. And also if you have the wrong person, because firms like mine do cost money. We don't work for free.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely some, some considerations there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no doubt. I mean, I think that really, I do a bit of work in sales, and I understand that. But when you look at sales, there's so much more around it than the people themselves, that especially today with the different technology that you got available to help sell better and to help. I interviewed someone last week or a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about AI for sales teams that were like large industrial distributors. Say example that I'm with a company like Fastenal, and I'm a new salesperson with Fastenal. Well, Fastenal's got 4 gazillion products in their catalog. How the hell am I, a new salesperson, going to come in? But if the AI would be able to go, okay, here's your client, here's what they bought in the last 90 days. It's about time for them to be able to replenish. And here's what other clients like them bought, and maybe you should, suggest to them those kind of things. Also put those salespeople in the position to win. Whereas it's not so much survival of the fittest anymore, because the sales game, a lot of that at the even in the mid and higher tiers is still that way.
I totally agree. I've kind of been out of the software game for about 4 years. So I'm not, on the cutting edge of what's out there. I do use software myself, and I think it's critical. Of course, you can over index and use too much software, and then conflicting messages, which I think is a real problem.
Yeah.
It is important, which probably underscores, the thought earlier about, even a dummy could do it. Now everybody thinks there's so much software that anybody should be able to do.
Yeah. And I don't think sales is a tough job. I don't think, and I'm never going to ever say it's not, because it is, and it is because consistently you have to get ready to get up and swing. And I don't care if you're managing salespeople or in the sales field, in the field doing sales, it's tough. And I was just curious, as we talked a little bit there about, I think there are a lot of companies that rush to blame the person rather than the everything around them that could really be contributing to the performance.
100%.
Yeah.
That's part of my job too, though. When I have those conversations, Damon, I don't always leave with a wreck. I don't always leave.
Yeah.
Some of the times it's a different conversation.
Yeah.
If you have a different issue, I think you need to solve first, and then maybe phase 2 is to hire that sales leader. But you've gone through 2 in 6 months. Maybe it's not a person thing. Maybe there's something else going on here.
Yeah, that's definitely something. Is when you see the multiple turnovers, or in our case, as I like to say, is we have a little baseball team here in the Northwest called the Mariners, and we're the oldest team that's never won a World Series. I don't think it's the players or the coaches after a while.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it happens in a lot of places. So when you're doing the recruiting now, what do you think some of the biggest challenges to recruiting sales executives are these days?
Sure. And, again, too, we focus across sales, marketing, and technology. So it's not just sales.
Yes.
But I feel that, there's a lot of challenges that are out there. First and foremost, I feel like a lot of companies are trying to kind of mirror what's cool and what's hip. It started with the coolers where everything was full, or beers on.
Yeah.
And of course, that's kind of a phase that's been phased out. Now it's remote work. But, frankly, I feel like a lot of companies have adopted kind of the same verbiage in regards to talent. And yes, unfortunately.
Yeah. So they're starting to try to, yeah, because that I tell you, that was a big deal for a while. It's like fun
Right.
Fridays and have the beer on tap and stuff like that. And I don't know if people got wise to it, but I know that there were some companies that I knew of that did a lot of that, but then the pay, the benefits, and everything else for the employees weren't nearly as good as other places.
Right. Whatever stuff. Yeah. And of course, too, I'd say executives don't care about those things, but that's just one of the challenges. And then pre-COVID, I feel like we were more in a candidates market. And so basically it's kind of like the real estate market. So
Yep.
you've got a lot of candidates or sorry, a few candidates, a lot of jobs. In a situation where I was talking to candidates that I thought were very strong, companies were coming with a compelling offer, and they'd have 3, 4 offers.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so it came down to money as well as flexibility. Now
Hmm.
we're at the inverse, where there's a tremendous amount of candidates and few jobs, and so it's tough being able to kind of stick out from the crowd. I ultimately have to have a compelling story. Of course, it's got to be factual, but
Yes.
but companies need to kind of create and think through what's compelling about working at their organization versus another one. And I'd say that's one of the toughest challenges. And again, it goes back to kind of how important our intake is because we need to understand why is it unique? Because ultimately you're competing against your competition.
Yeah. Yeah. And you make a good point because I think a lot of things have not just COVID, but I think that COVID changed the economy, and no doubt about that, and changed the job market and such. But we will come back into the day where people are more selective if they can be about the places they work, and at the executive level, I think that they're still going to be selective to a certain amount. But
Right.
a lot of people that are the leaders of these companies, and I don't mean just the sales executives, the marketing executives, and the tech executives like you're talking about, but I'm talking about the founders, the CEOs, the board members in these companies. They have to have a social presence. They have to think about online reputation management. They got to think about what the 6 employees that they made angry 2 years ago that went to Glassdoor and hammered the company. At that just wasn't there 10 years ago. It wasn't
Agreed.
there.
Totally agreed. And another situation too, kind of with COVID and people, I don't want to say desperate, but looking to make a change, especially if somebody doesn't necessarily is not gainfully employed currently, is being a flight risk. And that's
Yeah.
another reason why I think that companies should leverage agencies when they can. Not that we're always perfect in fleshing that out, but that's a real issue right now where somebody, if we're desperate, we're going to do what we have to do. And so,
Oh,
part of our job is to kind of try to, again, to use the same word, flesh out whether or not, what's the motivation for taking this position? Are you really excited about the opportunity, or you taking it because you have to have a job?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's in the tactical world, that's in the strategic. I mean, it's across the board. And
Yeah.
that's a big issue right now.
Yeah, I can imagine. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. There's a lot of people that would take the job to make the cash now, do whatever they need to do,
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
cross country.
Yeah.
And as soon as they can find something else, they're back home. So
Yeah, that's a tremendous cost to companies. So not only are they paying, somebody like us or, LinkedIn,
yeah.
they're not free, but they're onboarding these individuals.
Yes.
So they basically are sucking resources out of them with no intention on staying. They leave, and the company's starting from square one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. And at the executive level, I mean, it's even probably tougher because, or more expensive because, they just get the executive comes in, they've got ideas of how they're going to do things, and they start down that road.
Right.
And then you're into it 6 months and they're really getting into the swing of something, and they leave. Now you got to start over again because it's more than likely not going to be the same program or the thought process coming in behind it.
Well, couple that with the fact too that it typically takes around 9 months for an executive to find a new position, and so
Yeah.
you find people that they can master desperation.
Hmm.
They take a job that they shouldn't have, and it's a real situation
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So, someone asked me this the other day when I was getting interviewed. So what haven't I asked you about sales and marketing and technology recruiting that I should have asked you?
Wow. Way to flip it on me, Damon. We didn't talk about the platform that I kind of launched about 2.5 months ago.
Yeah, let's
Maybe
talk about that then.
a good segue. Yes, we've talked a lot about Indeed and LinkedIn and how they're ultimately just trying to go after the quantity, not necessarily the quality. And so I'm trying. With my company, I've really got two business units. I've got the one where we're out doing executive recruiting. We're doing contract work. But I'll also try to spin up kind of another business unit that's more of a software company where I aim to be kind of the antithesis of LinkedIn. And so it's a closed network for executive level, subject matter experts across sales, marketing, and technology, where they go through our vetting process and they actually join our network. So they join our
Okay.
Conversely, companies go through the same process. And so we're vetting companies, we're actually vetting their positions. We're helping companies kind of build out their profiles and build out their job descriptions. And then within the platform, they literally can post something out into the ether. So as an example, I need a CTO company. Here's the salary, and a budding CTO within the network can find that position, apply for the job. They create commerce.
Okay.
So if we have a conversation 2-3 years, I hope the company we identify more as a software company versus a sheer services company, because that's really where I see the market going, to be honest with you. And if you can curate the individual component, but also the jobs as well, then the matches and the value of the network has been increased tenfold. And last point, I don't want to sit here and hate upon LinkedIn and Indeed, especially as I use LinkedIn a lot for business development and getting the message out there. But they don't necessarily curate the jobs, and so if companies have the budget or an open spot to post a job, they can. And so, not to say that there's a lot of fake jobs out there, but you will find companies that are kind of advertising jobs as a way to say, "Hey, we're still alive, we're still growing," and maybe they're using it as a muse or a ways to kind of get resumes and get people into the ecosystem with no intention on ever hiring them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm trying to alleviate with the platform side by not only vetting the talent, but also ensuring that the jobs are actually real and factual, and they're going to do something if they find the right candidate.
Yeah. So do you see that there's many executive level positions that are open that are not open anymore or just not there?
I think with the executive level positions, that could be some mud on your face, to be honest with you. That's more so kind of, with, I'd say, lower salaried
Okay.
individuals, but it is the reality of the platforms.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no doubt. Cool. All right. Well, then when you're creating those vetted communities, I think you can build the trust level across the community and understand in that situation that if the people that come into it and the businesses that come into it understand and respect the level that it takes to get in there, they're then going to be able to trust, I'm going to work for a company that has at least passed these levels of entrance, and vice versa, is that Damon's not going to get into the group if he's not who he says he is.
Exactly. And so we also have a referral component to the network as well, which I think further, I don't want to say validates, but increases the trust factor, which to your point is critical, especially in my industry. Every customer I have is a repeat customer because you get in, you have an opportunity, and then you provide value, but you create trust.
Yeah.
Trust it's hard to establish, and it's super easy to lose.
Yeah, no doubt. Huh. That's good. Well, it's interesting now. Is if someone wants to see this platform, wants to understand more about it, and how would they find out about it, or where would they get to it?
Sure. URL, website's the easiest. It's thefreeagent.com.
Okay.
So don't ask me how I actually ended up with that URL, but it's thefreeagent.com.
All right. Well, that's a good one for it.
It's got an apply at the top right or join now. And
okay, good.
Yeah.
Yep. And they'll start the process that way. Well, that's good. Well, Beau, it's been great talking to you. And I think that it's interesting, your approach to, pre-vetting candidates, pre-vetting companies, and really kind of changing the way that this is done, and do it more the way that I think sales and marketing is happening now in today's markets. So, yeah, it's good stuff. Well, if someone wants to reach out to you, is LinkedIn a good spot to get a hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's fine. It's just, linkedin.com/Beau Billington, BeauBillington, or my email, which is beau@thefreeagent.com.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I didn't see that we had Rodney was listening in. So, hey, Rodney. Rodney listens to us often. I think it's a commute listen to him. So that's good. Beau, thanks so much for being here. Beau Billington from thefreeagent.com. If you need to get a hold of him, just look up Beau Billington on LinkedIn, or go to thefreeagent.com to look more about the platform he has developed around matching candidates and companies in a controlled environment. Did I say that correctly?
I think you crushed that. In fact, I'm going to adopt that tagline.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it just came out, so we're lucky there. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us on the Face of Business, and thanks, Beau, for being here. And we will be live on Thursday talking about another topic, and listen to something hopefully interesting about business and life. Cool. Thanks, Beau.
Thanks so much, Dan. Appreciate you.
You bet.